I sat in that conference room and looked at the people surrounding the table, and I thought about something my father told me when I was 12 years old. He said, "Marcus, the loudest person in any room is almost never the most powerful one. Watch the quiet ones. The quiet ones are the ones who have already done the work." My father was the quietest man I ever knew. He built a $14 million manufacturing company with his hands, his mind, and 30 years of disciplined silence. He did not boast. He did not threaten. He did not need to. The work spoke in his place, always had, always would. He passed away on the 4th of March, 2 months after his diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer. It moved through him the way those things do, fast and absolute, allowing no negotiation. He was 68 years old. He was the most decent man I have ever known. His funeral was on a Friday. The inheritance meeting was the following Tuesday. I want you to hold that for a moment. 4 days. My father was 4 days in the ground, and the woman he had married 7 years ago was already seated at a mahogany conference table with 2 corporate attorneys, a real estate consultant, and a smile that had no business appearing on anyone's face in a room that was supposed to be about grief. Her name was Vivian. She was 54 years old, immaculately presented and possessed of the particular confidence that belongs to people who have spent years quietly positioning themselves for a specific moment and have now, at last, arrived at it. She wore a black dress that was expensive enough to be respectful and fitted enough to be something else entirely. Beside her sat her son, Brandon. He was 26 years old, and he had the look of a young man who has been told his entire life that he deserves things and has never once been required to earn them. I sat across from them both, my hands folded on the table, and I waited. Before I tell you what happened when my father's lawyer walked through that door, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from, and if you have ever had to sit in a room and trust that the truth would arrive exactly when it needed to, hit that like button, because that is exactly what this story is about. To understand that Tuesday morning, you have to understand 7 years of Tuesday mornings before it. Vivian entered my father's life when I was 29. My mother had passed away 4 years earlier, and my father, being the kind of man who was genuinely better with a partner than without one, had eventually allowed himself to be open to companionship again. I understood it. I respected it. A man who loved as completely as my father did was not meant to be alone. What I did not understand was Vivian, not for lack of trying. I extended every courtesy. I attended every dinner. I engaged with genuine effort. But there is a particular kind of person who receives warmth without returning it, who takes stock of everything around them and assigns each item a value and a use, and who moves through family the way a guest moves through a hotel, extracting what is available, contributing nothing, leaving without acknowledgement. Vivian was that kind of person. Brandon was her primary project. She had raised him alone before my father, and she had raised him with the singular conviction that the world owed him a comfortable life, and that her job was to collect it on his behalf. He had never held a job for longer than 8 months. He drove a car my father had bought him. He wore clothes my father had funded. He sat at my father's table 3 times a week and called him Bill with a casualness that I watched my father absorb without comment, because that was who my father was. He absorbed, he observed, he did not confront, but he prepared. I did not know that then. I would not understand it fully until that Tuesday morning when Gerald Holt, my father's attorney, of 21 years, pushed open the conference room doors and walked in carrying a sealed manila envelope. But I am getting ahead of myself. The meeting opened the way these meetings do, formally, procedurally, with Gerald's junior associate distributing bound copies of summary documents to everyone at the table. Vivian accepted her copy without looking at it. She already knew what she wanted the outcome to be. Gerald had barely finished his opening remarks when Vivian leaned forward. She placed both palms flat on the table, looked directly at me, and smiled. It was the coldest smile I have ever seen on a human face. The smile of someone who has rehearsed this moment many times in private and is now delivering the performance. "Now that your father is gone, Marcus," she said, "the company will be going into Brandon's name. It has already been discussed. The succession plan is clear." She tilted her head slightly. "I suggest you take whatever personal items you need from the office and begin making your own arrangements. The company belongs to us now. It is time for you to go and fend for yourself." I looked at her. I looked at Brandon, who was examining his phone. I looked at her two attorneys, who were both watching me with the careful attention of people waiting to see how a cornered animal responds. I said nothing. I smiled. Not a cold smile, not a performance, a quiet, genuine, deeply settled smile. The smile of a man who has heard an alarm clock go off that no one else in the room can hear. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected argument. She had prepared for conflict, for raised voices, for the kind of emotional reaction that she could use against me, could point to as evidence of instability or irrationality. She had not prepared for calm. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was not knowing what my father had said to Gerald Holt 11 weeks before he died. Gerald cleared his throat gently. He reached into the leather briefcase beside his chair and produced the manila envelope. It was sealed with a notarial stamp, the red wax and embossed seal of an officer of the court. He placed it at the center of the table without explanation. "Before we proceed to the distribution of assets," Gerald said, his voice carrying the particular measured weight of a man who knows the exact significance of what he is about to do, "William left a sealed instruction for this meeting. He asked me to open it in the presence of all parties and to read its contents aloud before any succession discussions took place." He looked around the table. He had the courtesy to look at everyone, but I noticed his gaze rested on Vivian for just a fraction of a second longer. "He was requested to do this," Gerald continued, regardless of objection. "It was a formal instruction, attached to the primary estate documentation and notarized in my presence in December." Vivian's jaw tightened. Her attorney leaned toward her and murmured something. She waved him off with a small, sharp gesture. Gerald broke the seal. He unfolded the document inside, 2 pages, dense with text, with a second smaller document clipped behind it. He adjusted his reading glasses. He began. The first page was a letter. My father's words, in the formal language of legal dictation, but unmistakably his voice, precise, unhurried, carrying the particular weight of a man who has chosen each word with full understanding that they will be his last on the subject. He began with a statement of clarity. He wished the record to show that he was of sound mind when these instructions were prepared. He wished the record to show that his succession intentions had been deliberately and carefully considered. He wished to correct in his own words a misunderstanding that he believed certain parties had been operating under. He had been aware, he wrote for some time, that assumptions had been made about the inheritance of Whitfield Manufacturing by parties whose legal standing to inherit was not what they believed it to be. Gerald turned the page. He had therefore commissioned in November a private DNA analysis conducted by an accredited laboratory examining the biological relationship between William James Whitfield and Brandon Cole Whitfield. He unclipped the second document. He set the first page aside. He read the results in the same steady, unhurried voice. No biological relationship detected. The words dropped into the room the way a stone drops into still water, with a small, quiet impact, and then rings expanding outward in every direction. Brandon looked up from his phone. Vivian's face did not collapse. I will give her that. She had enough control to hold her expression for several seconds before something behind it began to fracture. One of her attorneys stood up. The other reached for his phone. Gerald folded the document, removed his glasses, and looked at Vivian across the table. William also wished me to read the final paragraph of his letter, he said. He put his glasses back on. Brandon is not my biological son, my father had written. I have known this for 3 years. I chose not to confront it publicly during my lifetime because I believe that the truth requires the right moment to produce its full effect. That moment is now. My company, my estate, and my legacy will pass to my son Marcus, who earned it, who deserved it, and who is, in every sense that matters, mine. Gerald set the letter down. The room was completely silent. I did not speak. I did not look at Vivian. I looked out the window at the street below, at the ordinary Tuesday morning moving past the glass, indifferent to everything happening in that room. I thought about my father, about the 12-year-old version of me learning to read a room, about 30 years of watching a quiet man build something extraordinary and never once asked to be thanked for it. He had known. He had carried the knowledge of Vivian's deception for 3 years and had said nothing, not because he was weak, because he was strategic, because he understood that the right response to a lie is not another confrontation. It is patience, preparation, and the precisely timed arrival of the truth. He had handed it to Gerald in a sealed envelope and trusted the moment to do what moments do when they are properly prepared. The legal process that followed was long, and for Vivian, expensive. Her claims against the estate were dismissed one by one. Brandon's designation as a dependent beneficiary was formally reviewed and substantially reduced in light of the DNA findings and in light of the evidence of financial manipulation that Gerald's team had quietly documented over the preceding months. Transfers, withdrawals, patterns that told their own story once someone finally went looking. Vivian vacated the house my father owned within 60 days. She left without ceremony, which was, I suppose, appropriate, given how little ceremony she had ever offered anyone else. Whitfield Manufacturing did not skip a single day of operation. It did not need to. My father had made sure of that too. Transition documents prepared months in advance. Operational succession plans already filed. Introductions already made to the senior staff. Everything in order. Everything quietly in its place, long before anyone in that conference room knew it was coming. He knew he was dying. He used the time he had left with the same discipline he had brought to everything else in his life. I sat at my father's desk for the first time the week after the inheritance meeting. His nameplate was still on the door. His photograph was still on the credenza. Him and my mother, young and laughing at something out of frame, in the particular way of people who do not yet know what they are going to build together. I sat in his chair. I looked at his desk. I felt the weight of what had been left to me. Not the money, not the building, not the $14 million of enterprise value that the accountants had placed on it. The weight of being trusted, of being called mine by a man who did not use words carelessly and meant every one of them. I am going to be worthy of it, I told the empty room. I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure that is true. If this story reminded you of someone who built quietly and loved without asking to be thanked, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are lucky enough to still have a parent who trusted you with something important, do not wait for a sealed envelope to show them you deserved it.